Hi, scary lovers. Please like and subscribe if you're into scary stories like me. Shadows in the dark. It was a late autumn evening when Clara first noticed him. The sun dipped behind the skyline, casting long shadows that danced in the golden light. She hurried home from her job at the local library, her mind swirling with thoughts of her upcoming presentation. As she rounded the corner, she felt a prickle at the back of her neck, an instinctual warning that something was amiss. A figure lingered at the edge of the park, just beyond her line of sight. He stood still, watching, and something about the way he remained motionless sent a chill down her spine. Shaking off the unease, Clara quickened her pace, her breath quickening as she neared the safety of her apartment. Once inside, she locked the door behind her, the sound of the deadbolt clicking echoing in the stillness. She poured herself a glass of water, trying to dismiss the feeling of being watched. It wasn't the first time she had felt paranoia creeping in. Living alone in a city could do that to anyone. Over the next few days, the uneasiness turned into a gnawing fear. Clara saw the man again, always lurking at the edge of her peripheral vision. He never approached, never spoke, but she could feel his gaze on her. Each time she left her apartment, he seemed to be there, waiting. Clara tried to convince herself she was being dramatic. After all, she was just a young woman living alone. She had read about stalkers but never thought it would happen to her. One night, while scrolling through social media, Clara posted a photo of herself at a coffee shop, laughing with friends. A few hours later, as she prepared for bed, she received a notification. A comment on her photo from a user with no profile picture and an unrecognizable name. "You look beautiful tonight." Her heart raced. It was innocuous enough, but something about it felt wrong. She dismissed it, trying to rationalize that it was just a random comment. But she couldn't shake the feeling that it was connected to the man she'd seen. Days turned into weeks, and the feeling of being followed intensified. Clara confided in her best friend, Lila, during a movie night. "I think someone is watching me. I keep seeing this guy around town, and I got a weird comment on my post." Lila frowned, concern etching her features. "You should report it, just to be safe." But Clara hesitated. Reporting a feeling seemed trivial. What evidence did she have? She'd only seen the man, never spoken to him. But Lila insisted, and eventually, Clara agreed to file a report with the local police. The officer took her statement, but she could see the doubt in his eyes. "We'll keep an eye out," he said. "But unless he approaches you or makes threats, there's not much we can do." Frustrated, Clara left the station feeling even more helpless. That night, she decided to stay up late, binge-watching a series to distract herself. The walls felt like they were closing in, and shadows lurked in every corner of her apartment. A week later, as she returned home from work, Clara felt the familiar sensation of being watched. She turned to look, her heart racing, and saw him standing in the same spot, staring intently at her. He was closer this time, just outside the park, his features obscured by the fading light. Clara's instincts kicked in, and she hurried into her building, her pulse pounding in her ears. She locked the door and pressed her back against it, breathing heavily. That night, she had trouble sleeping, her mind racing with anxiety. At 2 a.m., she jolted awake, a noise pulling her from sleep. It was faint, a scratching sound. She sat up, straining to hear. Was it just her imagination? Then she heard it again, a soft tapping at her window. She froze, terror flooding her senses. She slowly turned her head toward the window, the moonlight illuminating the room. The figure of the man loomed outside, his face partially obscured by darkness. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Without thinking, she grabbed her phone and dialed 911, her hands shaking as she whispered her address. The operator assured her help was on the way. She remained still, watching as the man's eyes darted around, scanning her apartment. Clara felt trapped, heart pounding as she realized she had to act. She crept toward the bathroom, closing the door and locking it behind her. She could hear the man's breath outside, heavy and deliberate. Minutes felt like hours as Clara waited, barely breathing. The sound of sirens finally broke through the tension, and the man turned, disappearing into the shadows. Clara heard footsteps approaching her apartment, followed by the urgent sound of pounding on her front door. "Clara, it's the police. Open up." With trembling hands, she unlocked the bathroom door and rushed to the front. She flung the door open, and two officers rushed in, scanning the room. "Where is he?" one of the officers asked, his voice firm. "He was just here," Clara stammered, pointing to the window. "He was watching me." The officers quickly searched the apartment but found no trace of the man. They advised her to stay with friends or family for the night and promised to patrol the area. Shaken, Clara called Lila, who rushed over. They spent the night talking and trying to distract themselves, but sleep eluded Clara. The image of the man burned into her mind. The next few days felt surreal. Clara stayed with Lila, and the police increased patrols around her apartment. Clara's world shrank, filled with anxiety and dread. Every sound made her jump, and the shadows felt like they were closing in. But as days turned into weeks, the fear began to fade. She returned to her apartment, trying to reclaim her sense of normalcy. She even began jogging again, hoping to clear her mind and reclaim her life. One morning, as she jogged through the park, she felt a sense of liberation. The sun was shining, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. But as she rounded a bend, she spotted him, standing by the trees, watching her. Panic surged through her, and she turned to run. She could hear his footsteps behind her, quickening as she fled. She sprinted toward the street, her heart pounding in her chest. Just as she reached the road, she stumbled and fell, scraping her hands and knees. Before she could get up, he was there, looming over her. "Why are you running?" he asked, his voice low and calm. Clara scrambled backward, fear coursing through her. "Stay away from me." He stepped closer, and Clara realized something was off about him. He wasn't just a stalker, he was obsessed. "I just want to talk," he said, a smile creeping across his face that sent chills down her spine. "No, I don't want to talk to you," Clara shouted, scrambling to her feet. Suddenly, a couple walking nearby turned to look, their presence drawing his attention. "You're making a scene," he hissed, glancing at Clara with fury. "You'll regret this." She didn't wait to hear more. Clara dashed toward the road, breathless and terrified. The couple called after her, but she didn't stop until she reached the safety of her apartment. Once inside, Clara locked the door and leaned against it, trembling. She could feel her heart racing as she dialed Lila's number. "He was right there. He spoke to me." Lila rushed over, and Clara recounted the encounter, the terror fresh in her mind. "We need to go to the police. This has gone too far." They arrived at the station, and Clara reported the incident. The officer listened, his expression grave. "We'll increase patrols, but you need to be vigilant. Consider getting a restraining order." Clara nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and anger. She couldn't live in constant dread. She needed to take control. The next day, Clara filed for a restraining order against the man. She provided the police with his description and the incidents that had occurred. The officer promised to serve the order as soon as they located him. Days passed without incident, and Clara tried to reclaim her life. She returned to work, and though her co-workers were sympathetic, she felt their concern weighing on her. She kept a low profile, avoiding places where she might encounter the man. One evening, as Clara was preparing dinner, her phone buzzed with a notification. A message from an unknown number appeared. "I miss you." Clara's heart sank. She immediately blocked the number, but the message only amplified her fear. Who was this? Was it him? Days turned into a blur of anxiety, but Clara tried to focus on her work and friends. Lila stayed close, ensuring Clara was never alone. They spent evenings watching movies and drinking wine, attempting to drown out the fear. One night, while Clara was at Lila's apartment, she received another message from the unknown number. "I know where you are." Panic gripped her. "Lila, I think he's found me." Lila's face paled as she snatched Clara's phone. "We need to go to the police. This has gone too far." They rushed to the police station again, Clara's heart pounding in her chest. Once inside, Clara reported the latest message, her voice trembling with fear. He knows where I am. What if he comes here? The officer's expression turned serious. We'll do everything we can to keep you safe. We recommend that you stay with someone tonight. Clara nodded, feeling a mix of dread and determination. After filing another report, they returned to Lila's apartment, where Clara tried to breathe normally. But as night fell, she felt a sense of unease settle over her. Lila suggested they watch a movie to distract Clara's mind. They settled on a horror film, but the eerie atmosphere only heightened Clara's anxiety. Every creak of the floorboards made her jump, and she found it hard to focus on the screen. Just after midnight, her phone buzzed again, and Clara's heart raced as she picked it up. I'm closer than you think. No, Lila exclaimed, grabbing the phone. We need to call the police. Before they could dial, the lights flickered, and the power went out. Clara's heart sank. Lila, what's happening? It's okay. It's probably just a blackout, Lila said. But Clara could hear the uncertainty in her voice. Suddenly, they heard a faint sound, a soft tapping coming from the window. Clara's breath quickened. Did you hear that? Lila nodded, fear etched on her face. They crept toward the window, peering through the curtains, but the darkness outside obscured everything. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. Clara grabbed Lila's hand. We need to get out of here. Now. They moved silently to the door, but as Clara turned the knob, it wouldn't budge. Panic set in as she jiggled it again, but it was locked from the outside. Oh my God, we're trapped. Lila's eyes widened. What do we do? Call 911, Clara said, her voice shaky. We need to get help. As Lila fumbled for her phone, the tapping stopped, replaced by a chilling silence. Suddenly, the door creaked open slightly, and Clara's breath caught in her throat. A silhouette loomed in the doorway, half-shadowed. It was him. Hello, Clara, he said, his voice low and smooth. I've been waiting for you. Clara's hands trembled as she stood there. We need to call the police, Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Lila called 911, her expression serious. With a whispering voice, Lila recounted the new happenings. The operator took her seriously, recognizing the escalation. We'll come right away and leave the sirens out. The man noticed that Lila was on the phone and left even faster than he appeared. When the cops arrived, the man was gone. The officer on duty took her seriously this time, recognizing the escalation. We'll set up a sting operation. If he contacts you again, we'll trace the message and hopefully catch him. Feeling a mix of dread and determination, Clara agreed to cooperate. She returned home, hyper-aware of her surroundings. That night, she didn't sleep, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Just before dawn, her phone buzzed again. I'm outside. Let's talk. Fear gripped her, but Clara steeled herself. She knew this was the moment to face him. She messaged back, Okay, I'm coming out. They called back the police and gave them notice, right before she went outside. With Lila at her side, Clara stepped into the cool morning air, the streetlights flickering above. The adrenaline coursed through her veins as they moved toward the building entrance. As they stepped outside, the world felt eerily quiet. Clara scanned the shadows, her heart racing. Where is he? She whispered to Lila. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, stepping into the glow of the streetlight. It was him, his eyes glinting with a disturbing mix of anticipation and madness. Clara, he said, a twisted smile on his lips. I knew you'd come. Stay away from me, Clara shouted, her voice shaky but resolute. Lila stepped forward, protective. You need to leave her alone. You're being watched. The man's smile faltered, and Clara could see the shift in his demeanor. You don't understand. I just wanted to help you. You need to see things my way. Before Clara could respond, she saw the flash of police lights approaching. The man turned to flee, but Clara felt a surge of courage. No, you can't escape this. As the police cars screeched to a halt, officers jumped out, shouting for him to stop. He hesitated, and Clara saw the fear in his eyes, realizing he was cornered. The officers apprehended him quickly, handcuffing him as he struggled against their grip. Clara felt a mix of relief and rage. The nightmare was finally coming to an end. "Do you have any last words for her?" one officer asked, tightening the cuffs. He turned to Clara, his expression twisted. "You think this is over? I'll always be watching." Clara's heart raced, but she stood her ground. "No more. This ends today." With the man in custody, the officers led him to a police car. Clara felt the weight lift as they drove away, knowing he would face the consequences of his actions. In the weeks that followed, Clara felt the heaviness of fear begin to lift. With the restraining order in place and the man in custody, she found a renewed sense of safety. She focused on rebuilding her life, attending therapy, and leaning on her friends for support. Lila remained by her side, encouraging Clara to reclaim her love for the outdoors. They began going for long walks in the park, finding solace in the beauty of nature. One afternoon, as they sat on a bench overlooking the trees, Clara took a deep breath, the air fresh and invigorating. "I'm starting to feel like myself again," she said, a smile breaking through. Lila grinned back. "You're stronger than you know. You faced your fears and came out on the other side." Clara knew the scars would remain, but she was determined not to let them define her. She had survived a harrowing experience, and with every step forward, she felt more in control of her life. As she walked home that evening, the sun setting behind the horizon, Clara allowed herself to feel hope. The shadows might linger, but they no longer held power over her. She was ready to embrace her future, unafraid and resolute. And while she would always remain vigilant, she knew she was no longer just a victim. She was a survivor, reclaiming her story one day at a time. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please let me know down below what kind of stories you would like to hear more from. Like and subscribe if you're into scary stories like me.